Welcome to today's deep dive.
Mhm.
You might expect a creator of galaxies to demand awe.
Right, like you'd expect an architect of the cosmos to wield absolute dominance.
Exactly. Maybe rule from some distant throne, surrounded by lightning, just demanding tribute from the tiny beings down below.
It's what we're used to, historically speaking.
Yeah, but today, we are looking at a set of sources that present a completely flipped script.
It really do. It's wild.
We're examining this really specific philosophical framework where the ultimate infinite cosmic power is incredibly indistinguishable from everyday human kindness.
Which is, it's a massive paradigm shift. We are basically analyzing a worldview where the staggering scale of the universe, the mechanics of stars and gravity, is somehow brought all the way down to the interpersonal level.
Right.
The grand design essentially boils down to how ordinary people treat each other.
And to unpack the internal logic of this framework today, we have a really fascinating stack of material.
Oh, yeah. We've got a lot to get through.
We do. We've got a truly striking visual source, which is this very evocative image of Jesus Christ, alongside three really short, intense text excerpts.
And those are titled The Incarnate Architect of the World, The Path of Divine Humility, and The Sovereignty of Forgiveness and Love.
Right. And I want to make it clear for you listening, we are exploring this material totally impartially.
Yeah, as a philosophical and theological framework.
Exactly. Regardless of your personal background, we're just aiming to understand the specific narrative these texts and imagery construct. Because just looking at these as narrative blueprints, they construct a profound paradox.
They really force us to look at the intersection of infinite power and, well, radical vulnerability.
Yeah. And the visual source is sort of the perfect anchor for this, right?
Oh, absolutely, because it immediately establishes the staggering scale we're dealing with. It visualizes the exact tension that the texts then try to resolve.
Let me paint a picture of this image for you listening. We have a central figure of Jesus Christ, dressed in traditional flowing robes.
Like a simple homespun white tunic draped with a rich red cloth.
Right, very grounded. And he's standing with his arms open. That gesture is, it's crucial to everything we're going to discuss today.
It's super welcoming, completely non-defensive.
Yeah, his palms are facing outward, empty. But the setting surrounding this very grounded human figure is just absolutely mind-bending.
It really is. The contrast hits you instantly.
He is glowing with this intense radiant light, standing on what looks like a polished, reflective cosmic floor. And he's situated at the exact center of the cosmos.
Right. And surrounding this solitary human figure are these illuminated, glowing orbital rings. It looks almost like a massive astrolabe or, the orbital paths of planets expanding outward into the void.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And within those golden rings, we see swirling galaxies, entire spiral galaxies, countless stars, cosmic dust, all caught in the gravitational pull of this single human-shaped figure right in the center.
It's a lot to take in. And that visual connects directly to our first text excerpt, the one titled, The Incarnate Architect of the World.
Let's hear it.
The text says, quote, God and creator of this world, who came into world as human.
Notice the deliberate, almost aggressive tension between the infinite and the finite in that single line.
Right.
You have the infinite, which is represented by those swirling galaxies and orbital rings we just talked about, the raw, terrifying mechanics of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the finite, the human form, wearing everyday robes. The text doesn't say this creator sent a messenger or a proxy or like a hologram.
No, it says the creator came into world as human.
Exact.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the functional reason for this, because historically, human rulers do the exact opposite.
They really do.
Right. A pharaoh or an emperor acquires power and immediately tries to distance themselves from humanity. They build pyramids, they sit on elevated thrones, they wear gold to simulate being divine.
True.
But here, the text claims the divine is putting on homespun cloth to simulate being human. It's kind of like, think of a master software developer who builds this infinitely complex, sprawling, virtual reality universe.
Okay, I like this.
But instead of just observing it from the outside or, manipulating the code from a dashboard, they actually insert themselves into the simulation as a basic everyday avatar.
Right, to experience the world exactly as the other users do.
Yeah.
That captures the dynamic perfectly, because sitting at the desk or being in the simulation removes the distance of authority.
Exactly.
And what's fascinating here is it highlights the core analytical question we have to ask of this framework, which is, Why?
Right. Why do it?
Why would an entity capable of architecting those galaxies intentionally choose the brutal limitations of a human body? Why choose to be hungry or tired or vulnerable to betrayal?
It doesn't make sense on the surface.
No, because the image shows a being who could presumably crush a planet with a single thought, yet his hands are open and empty.
It's totally counterintuitive to how we normally understand the acquisition and display of power.
Yeah.
Usually, power seeks to isolate itself to maintain superiority, right?
Always.
You build a fortress.
Yeah.
You put up walls. You surround yourself with guards.
Standard power relies entirely on isolation and coercion. Think about it. Kings build moats because proximity is dangerous.
Oh, that's a good point. Proximity is a threat.
Exactly. But here, the ultimate power seeks total, unprotected immersion in the mundane. It actively chooses proximity over distance.
But if you strip away all that cosmic power to become human, you lose the ability to force compliance. You lose the lightning bolt. So how do you actually change the system or enforce your will?
Right, that's the big question.
The text suggests you don't do it by rewriting the code from above. You do it through a live, ground-level demonstration.
Which brings us to the methodology. It wasn't just a sightseeing tour of the human condition. It was a highly specific instructional model.
Let's look at the text titled The Path of Divine Humanity. I really want you listening to focus on the exact phrasing here because it's slightly clumsy but incredibly specific.
It really is. Let's hear the quote.
It says, quote, "To first show to his world that humility to humans as human had been humble to all other humans is the only salvation by God his Father."
There is an immense amount of philosophical weight packed into that single, repetitive sentence.
There is. Here's where it gets really interesting. Usually, leaders or architects demand tribute. But here, the text insists that the Creator used his time as a human specifically to be humal or humble to other humans.
Right.
He didn't come to demand humanity be humble to him. He came to model humility toward them. How does this redefine salvation for you?
Well, that phrasing, "to first show," is the absolute linchpin of this entire concept. In this specific framework, salvation is not presented as a passive reward. It's not a transaction where you simply acknowledge a cosmic fact and receive a prize. It's presented as a directly modeled behavior. The Creator had to first show the world.
So it's an active blueprint.
Exactly. According to this text, achieving salvation from God his Father is directly contingent upon humans mimicking this extreme divine humility in their daily interactions with one another.
Wow. So the teacher sat at the desk specifically to record a tutorial on how to pass the test.
That's a great way to put it. And notice what the test actually is. The mechanics of winning, according to this framework, aren't about acquiring the most resources or dominating your peers.
Right.
The winning condition is radically humbling yourself to the people around you.
I want to push back on this, though, or at least explore the friction of this method.
Sure, go for it.
If you are the architect and your ultimate goal is for people to act with humility and kindness, why not just hard-code it into the human operating system?
Right, just force it.
Yeah. Why not write, "Be humble" and fire across the sky? Why go through the incredibly inefficient, painful process of becoming a human, living a human life for decades, and just hoping people pay attention to your example?
That is the crucial paradox of power in this framework. And the answer seems to be rooted deeply in the nature of free will and the true definition of a virtue.
How so?
Well, if you force someone to be humble, it isn't humility, it's subjugation.
Because true humility requires a choice.
By its very definition, humility must be a voluntary lowering of oneself. If the architect wrote the command in fire across the sky, humans would cower in terror.
They'd be terrified.
Right, they would obey out of sheer panic regarding the immense power, those swirling galaxies we saw in the image.
If a giant glowing entity in the sky says, "Be nice to each other," you're nice because you don't want to get vaporized.
Exactly.
That's mere compliance. That's self-preservation, not virtue.
Compliance under threat of force is just survival instinct. By coming as a human, as a vulnerable peer, the architect completely removes the coercive element of cosmic power.
Oh, wow.
He models the behavior from the ground level. He says, essentially, I am choosing to serve you, not out of necessity, but out of sovereign choice. And that invites humans to make that same uncoerced choice.
That is a staggering insight. Because human psychology violently resists humility.
Oh, 100%.
We are evolutionarily wired to dominate, to secure resources, to climb the hierarchy. Humility feels like losing. It feels like exposing your neck.
Yeah, we build massive egos to protect ourselves from the exact vulnerability that this text is demanding as the baseline for salvation.
It's a complete inversion of human instinct. The architect is introducing a patch to the human operating system that goes against our baseline coding.
And it requires a massive, almost incomprehensible amount of internal strength to execute.
Which naturally leads us to ask, what is the fuel for that kind of strength? If you are constantly humbling yourself, constantly turning the other cheek as a peer, how do you sustain that without just being destroyed by a ruthless world?
Right. You need something holding it up.
And our final source gives us the underlying forces that make this blueprint possible.
The structural integrity of the system.
Exactly. The final text is titled The Sovereignty of Forgiveness and Love. The excerpt is brief, but it carries the entire weight of the framework. It describes, quote, the biggest virtues of his, specifically as forgiveness and love.
We really have to analyze the use of the word sovereignty in that title. Applying sovereignty to forgiveness and love completely flips the traditional hierarchy of power on its head.
It really does. Because when we hear sovereignty, we think of absolute dominion. We think of a force that cannot be challenged, a power that dictates reality.
Usually that word is reserved for despots, kings, or fundamental forces of nature.
Right. If we draw a connection back to the visual source we looked at earlier, if the galaxies and orbital rings we saw in the image are held together by the physical sovereignty of gravity, then the human experience described in these texts is held together by the emotional sovereignty of forgiveness and love.
That is a beautiful synthesis. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains the exact mechanism at play. Let's look at the mechanics of retaliation versus forgiveness.
Okay.
When someone wrongs you, when they betray you, insult you, or harm you, the natural, automatic reaction in a deterministic world is retaliation, or at the very least, deep bitterness.
Cause and effect. They hit you, you hit back.
Exactly. In that cycle of cause and effect, you are completely controlled by the other person's action. Your emotional state and your future actions are being dictated by the person who harmed you.
You've lost your agency.
You've become a slave to the offense.
You just become reactionary.
But forgiveness functions as a circuit breaker. It steps entirely outside the normal laws of cause and effect. It is a sovereign choice to not let the cycle of harm dictate your future.
So by choosing to forgive, you are actually reclaiming absolute agency over your own response.
Yes, you are asserting dominance over the situation, not by crushing the offender, but by refusing to be corrupted by their action.
Well, it's powerful.
It means true power isn't about the glowing light or the cosmic scale we saw in the image. True power is the quiet, agonizingly difficult choice to look at another human being who has caused you pain and choose love instead of vengeance.
Because moving a star is just physics. It's just mass and energy.
Right.
Forgiving a person requires overriding your own ego. It requires conquering your own internal universe.
And according to the text, the incarnate architect views forgiveness and love as his biggest virtues. This implies that these aren't just nice, polite social concepts we invented to make civilization tolerable.
No, they're much bigger than that here.
In this framework, they are the foundational building blocks of reality. They are the supreme sovereign forces that hold the entire simulation together.
So if we synthesize this and trace the logical through line of all these sources together, we traveled from this massive galaxy-spanning visual of an incarnate architect down to incredibly intimate human-level actions of humility.
We establish the macro scale first, the infinite potential for coercion.
Right. And then that infinite power deliberately chooses to compress itself into a finite, vulnerable human avatar. Not to rule from a palace, not to demand tribute, but to execute a very specific ground-level demonstration.
To first show the world.
Exactly. To show that the only path forward, the only mechanism for salvation is extreme, voluntary humility toward other humans.
Shifting from the macro scale to the micro scale. The architect proves that compliance is meaningless. Only chosen virtue matters.
And the texts weave a narrative where the grand design of the entire universe ultimately boils down to how ordinary humans treat each other on a daily basis.
It removes all the grand excuses. It takes the most abstract, lofty theological concepts imaginable, the creation of the universe, divine salvation, supreme sovereignty, and grounds them entirely in interpersonal ethics.
It's remarkably intimate.
Yeah.
And frankly, it places a massive, terrifying amount of responsibility on the individual.
It really does. It's not about looking up at the sky, waiting for a magical decree, or waiting to be saved by some external force.
No.
It's about looking directly at the person next to you and making a sovereign choice about how you interact with them. Because the texts argue that your interaction with them is the mechanism of your salvation.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Even if you are just looking at this as a philosophical text, it's a radical challenge.
It asks you to evaluate how you use whatever power, influence, or knowledge you have in your own life.
Exactly, because we all have spheres where we hold power, no matter how small or mundane they seem, right?
Sure, a manager at work, a parent in a home, a senior member of a friend group.
Right. The challenge this framework poses is, are you wielding that power to elevate yourself? Are you building your own little fortress, demanding that people respect your authority and enforcing compliance through intimidation?
Or, following the blueprint of this architect, are you using whatever power you have to actively practice humility and love towards others?
When someone wrongs you, are you choosing the sovereign, circuit-breaking power of forgiveness, or are you taking the easy, automatic path of resentment and retaliation?
It really demands a harsh look at our own arrogance. If the ultimate authority figure in this narrative, the entity responsible for the physical universe, prioritized being humal to all other humans, it completely invalidates any excuse we might invent for our own ego.
Yeah, if the guy who built the swirling galaxies washes feet, to use a metaphor, what right do I have to demand a corner office or feel slighted when someone doesn't recognize my status?
That is the exact psychological friction the text is designed to create. It wants you to feel the weight of that paradox.
It's brilliant narrative architecture. Well, this has been an incredibly thought-provoking journey through these sources. We've traveled from the furthest, most terrifying reaches of the cosmos right down to the quietest, most intimate human choices.
We've seen how a framework can redefine the very nature of power.
As we wrap up our analysis today, I want to leave you with one final thread to pull.
Oh, perfect.
Something for you listening to mull over as you navigate your own spheres of influence. Based on the logic of these sources, if the creator of the universe believed the absolute most important thing to show to his world was humility to others, what does that suggest about the true, hidden mechanics of reality?
I love that question.
Right. Could it be that what we perceive as ultimate cosmic power is, in its purest form, completely indistinguishable from radical everyday kindness?
It's something to think about.